So, hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Josefine Meets. Today, I'm here with Andrea Horvath, who is a career transition coach. And the funny thing is that both Andrea and I have actually escaped the corporate world. And that is, or the funny thing, I don't know if it's that funny, but that is what we're going to talk about today about escaping the rat race. So, hi, Andrea, and welcome to my show.
Oh, hi, Josephine. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you. So, can you please give us a little bit more background on who you are and what it is that you do, and maybe also what you did before and what was your wake up call?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So, I used to be a certified professional accountant. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was doing all the right things. My resume looked great. I was the girl that got the promotions. I was the girl that got things done, all those things that you're kind of supposed to do. And I realized at some point that I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. I was bored. And it fluctuated between bored, stressed, overwhelmed, just upset with my situation. And I didn't know how to get out of it. And so I became a woman on a mission. I'm like, I've got to figure out, how do I escape this? I felt like I was just being rammed into this box that
Hmm.
I couldn't escape from. And I just was, every day was the same thing over and over again. It's like a groundhog day, right?
Yeah.
And so I went on a journey to figure out, okay, what do I need to learn about myself? Because I didn't want to just start switching jobs or start switching careers or doing all these things without understanding why I was doing it. And, was it actually going to get me to where I wanted to be? So years later, I went down a lot of different rabbit holes and I figured it out. And I realized I wanted to become a coach. And then I started to make that transition. And now I'm full time into that. And I essentially help people do the same thing, figure out what's going to make them happy, what's going to make them fulfilled, and make them really excited to wake up in the morning. And, most of my clients, although they don't necessarily come to me saying, okay, I want to get out of corporate, a lot of them don't realize that when we start working together. But what I have discovered over the years of doing this is that that's actually what most people want, is actually to get out of this rat race.
I think if we look at the definition of escaping the rat race, what it really means, and it's like talking about, when I escaped the rat race, for me it wasn't. I felt as I don't have a choice. I have to get out of here now. I had a different wake up call. I wasn't as planned and as goal oriented that you were. I need to figure this out because I felt as if I had painted myself in a corner and I had no clue how to get out of there. And I think independently, if that's how you feel, or if you have a little bit more like a planned solution like you had, I think the steps we need to follow are more or less the same. What do you think of that, Andrea?
Well, absolutely 100%. And I would say that most people right now are doing exactly what you did, is paint themselves into a corner. I
Hmm.
absolutely think, and then you feel very, very stuck. But you're right. What it comes down to is the first steps are is actually looking inward. And what most people do is they look outward. What can I do? Where can I fit? They talk to people. I'm doing this now. What would be an easy pivot to this? Or what could, and actually what that ends up doing is making you more depressed, unfortunately.
I
Yeah.
remember I was in a position at the bank where I was in, and I sent an email to a managing director, and I said, "Do you have something for me? I need to get out of this role." And he was like, "Hey, Josephine, I think you should take a step back and look at what you really want." And I was like, "What the?
Mm.
I don't want to do that. I want to get out of this now. Then I can start thinking about what I want to do next." But of course, he was
Yeah.
right. Of course, he was right because it's not, as you say in the movies, it's not you. It's actually me, right?
I actually liken this a lot to dating, to be honest with you. So I love that you brought that analogy in,
Yeah.
because it's exactly it. When I talk to women and just people in general, they say exactly, I just need to know what it is. I just need to get out. And there's no magic bullet. There's not like a note that can drop from the sky that can tell you what it is and then you just happily go on. It doesn't work that way, because the problem is people think, well, I just need to know what it is. But if you don't understand why and why it would work for you, you're actually not going to take the steps. That's the thing. You actually won't. I've seen it. You might start, and then as soon as you hit a little bump in that road, you're out. Like, you're just out.
Yeah, absolutely. And until the day when you get the wake up call, and the wake up call can be
Mm.
a burnout, that you're being let go, that someone very close to you passes away, like in my case, for example, or that you become seriously ill yourself, which also happened to me. So I had two wake up calls, if you want to put it like that. And there is no need to wait until then, but actually start acting on these things now. So, what would be the very first step that someone can do?
The very first step, I think, would be first of all, create space for yourself
Mm. Yeah.
and alone space, like off the mark. Stop talking to people, stop talking to looking at jobs, stop all that outside activity that can actually make you feel better in the moment that doesn't actually work. It start looking inward and ask yourself some questions. What do I love doing? And it's not what am I good at? Because those are two very different questions and people get really tripped up on those. The question isn't what am I good at? I was very good at being an accountant.
Yeah, me too. We have that in common. And I love
Right?
my Excel spreadsheets, but I hate accounting.
Yeah.
I was in such a bad mood when I did the accounting for my husband until the day I realized that why am I even doing this? I don't even like this. So
Yeah.
just because you're good at something doesn't mean you actually have to do it. Okay. So
Yeah.
look at yourself. Okay.
That's a big one, and again, I'm gonna stress that again, it's absolutely, what do I love doing? Because
Mhm.
what you love doing actually energizes you, and that's a lot of what the complaints I hear from people, and rightfully so, is they feel drained at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They feel completely life is being sucked out of them, and I get it, I was there. And so what do I love doing? Now, it's not always the activity itself that you need to repeat, though. And this is also where people get, tripped up. Like I had a client once, she's like, "Well, I love analyzing financial statements and writing out the reports afterwards." So she kept trying to find another position because I seem to attract a lot of people who've been in finance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she kept looking for a repeat position like that, and it's like, okay, like, let's look at, like, why did you love doing that? And a lot of what she loved doing was explaining all the variances and talking about stuff, and I'm like, "Well, that's a skill set all in itself, and why do you love doing that?" Part of it was because she was able to express herself. Because in finance, you don't get to do that a lot, right? It's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, there's an important piece of information. You staying an accountant, knowing that you love to express yourself probably isn't gonna work really well, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's a piece of valuable information. And so it's looking through not only your work life though, but also your personal life. Because there's things we do in our personal life because we have that freedom of choice, right? That we may not be experiencing right now in our current career.
Yeah.
Where do you spend all your time? Like for me, I spend thousands of hours in personal development. I couldn't get enough of it. I had to learn how the brain works. I had to learn how energy works. I had to learn about strategy. I had to learn everything. And I'm like, why am I doing all this?
Mhm.
I'm not getting quote unquote paid to do all this until I
And I
did,
think
right?
that is a super important key too. So kind of like I really hated that question until I had found what I wanted to do. But so it's like, what would you love doing without getting paid for it? And I think that is so key too. To first of all, what do you love doing, and what could you do all day long without getting paid for it? I think those are really, really key. And then we need to make sure that you do get paid for it because it's not as if we're going to do loads and loads of stuff for free. But that is like, how do you monetize what you really love doing? Yeah.
Exactly. That is exactly it, Josephine. It is actually putting those pieces together. So it's taking all this data, all this information, things you want in terms of your lifestyle too. This matters, right? Like
Mhm.
for me, being able to work anywhere in the world was a huge, it was non-negotiable for me.
Yeah.
So things like that, understanding, and you pull all these pieces together and go, okay, what do I do with this now? Right?
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
being able to put all those pieces together. But you have to have all the pieces because if you don't have them all, you kinda get there, and then the problem is if you kinda only get there, again, when things happen, you might pull yourself off that road. So
Yeah.
making sure you stay long enough in that journey of self-exploration and don't get impatient, which I know is challenging because most people want out and they want out now, like
Yeah.
you said.
Yeah.
I get that, but the work you do and laying that strong foundation of really understanding yourself really benefits you in the long run in a big way.
And I also know, and I know for a fact because I've done it myself, but because it's like once you have that goal, because I never had a goal in my whole corporate career because I didn't even want to be there in the first place. So how could I then have a goal, right? So it's like, to find a
The
goal
goal
that
is to
you
get out.
feel, yeah, it's like that you really want to pursue. So kind of define that big, hairy, scary goal that you really want to pursue, and then you start pursuing that. And in the long run, even if it looks like that is not going to happen until 5 years' time, but when you are so clear on that goal and you have set up kind of milestones, let's put a little bit like project management to this whole too, but you have the milestones and you break it down, you will actually achieve that goal way faster than what you thought would even be possible. And then it's also like doing something that you really love doing.
100%. I think what you said is so important. I think it's really about keeping that big picture always in mind, right?
Hmm.
Always
Hmm.
having that big picture. You know where you're going, and then always being able to bring it down to the micro level. And it's a constant balancing. And then when you're frustrated at this level, anytime in life, you go back up to that big picture.
Yeah.
What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Okay, and reconnecting. And that's why people talk about purpose so much. It's overused, and I don't always love that word, but there is a reason why we keep using it, is
Hmm.
understanding why you're doing what you're doing and why it's in alignment for you and why it's gonna make you feel fulfilled.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
connecting all those dots and keeping, like I said, bouncing back and forth whenever you need
Yeah.
to connect back in. Yeah, absolutely.
And one of my experiences, and maybe you can give a little bit more kind of hints and details to really kind of iron this out, because I set a goal, which I thought when I said it that it was big, hairy, and scary. I set the goal of being a public speaker, and I was like, I will do this
Mhm.
in 5 years' time. The tiny problem was that I had achieved it within 1.5 years. And then kind of like the air got sucked out of me a little bit. It was
Mm,
like, so what do I do now? Right. So, how do we define, as you say, the purpose? And I'm also not a big fan of this finding your why, because I think that is a little bit like it actually holds us back a little bit because
mm.
it feels so big and it feels so scary. But how do we define something that is so big that it seems unachievable, but it keeps us motivated? Do you have any tips and tricks for that?
I think it's about, and I know what you mean, and I think what you said also I wanna pull back on is how you said you achieved it faster than you thought you would.
Hmm.
And I really wanna emphasize that because that happens. That actually happens where you
Yeah.
think, "I can't do this, there's no way in the world," and then you do it, and all of a sudden you're like, "Uh, how did that happen?" Like, it
What?
just
What do I do now? Yeah.
and I have goosebumps as I say that because this happens with clients when I work with them. Like, I'm just amazed at how all of a sudden you can just get over those fears and just like in a moment, just be like, I'm so done with that fear, or I'm so done with holding myself back.
Hmm.
And things can happen a lot faster. What it's really about is always connecting back with yourself and asking yourself questions. What do I want? What feels good? And that's something we don't do when we're wanting to make a shift and you're wanting to escape that rat race. We go into our heads and we stay in our heads. And that's where people stay. They won't make a move if they're constantly in their heads. It's connecting back in your heart. What do I really want? What do
Hmm.
I want?
Hmm.
How do I want to feel? Like what feels good? What feels in alignment? What resonates? And that's not your head. You got to use your brain. You want to use your brain, obviously, strategy, implementation. That's where your brain comes in. But we've been living in a society that focuses 100% on our brain power.
Hmm.
It's all logic. Logic will get you a career that you can be successful in on paper. 100%. 100%. That's how I got my career, right? Just following all those steps,
Yeah.
but feeling really fulfilled, feeling free, feeling like you could have choices is about also asking yourself all the time, asking yourself, what's next for me? And creating space to actually listen to the answer. Like the
Mhm.
answer may not come in that moment, right? It might be next week when you're walking out in nature or in the shower.
Yeah.
It's just ideas pop into your head and it's like you just sit with it. How does that feel? I think I want to do that. Okay, cool.
Mm.
Go do
Mm.
that. Right?
And it needs to scare you a little bit. It needs to feel a little bit like, I don't know what to do next. Because that is the excitement. But in order for us to stay, stay motivated, stay on that path, we need to find that kind of like goal, because otherwise we be a little bit lost. I usually kind of talk about football or soccer, like 22 players on this court, and if they don't have any goal, you will have 22 players who are kind of like running around like headless chicken, right? So we need those goals, and that doesn't mean that we do one goal and then it's finished. We can continue scoring, but we need to have those goals. We need to know what's the next step. What's the next step?
And I think most people are afraid to even admit those things to themselves.
Hmm.
To be
Hmm.
really truthful with you, like to say, who am I to be a speaker? Who am
Yeah.
I to? And they almost don't want to say it out loud because there's always that fear. What if it doesn't happen?
Oh, it's such a good thing. I actually had a client both yesterday and today who said, I don't want to toot my own horn. And I said,
Toot it.
let's toot the horn. Let's toot it. So bring out all the good things. So what I usually do is I ask them, so what are you good at? What more? What more? And they write this whole list.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would say, let's go and toot some horns?
It's so amazing. And I was just thinking about this the other day. It's so funny you should mention this. And I think the reason why people don't toot their horns enough is because they don't want to sound like they're better than everybody else.
Yeah.
Because there's just been this arrogance, there's been that in our culture, right? In our society. There's been an arrogance, people are bragging or whatever. By you tooting your horn, it's not actually making anyone less. We all should be tooting our own horns and then realizing that we all have like unique gifts, talents, and abilities, and we all do cool things. It's not about somebody else being less. It's not about judgment or comparison. And that's where we're getting lost. And that's why a lot of people don't want to actually do that, to celebrate their wins and celebrate the amazingness that they are. Doesn't make anybody else less. If we all started tooting our own horns, we would all find the places that we're supposed to be and where we're going to be most valued and where we're able to really create more value for the world, which is what we really, really need, right? We need a lot of changes in this world. So we need people in alignment. And the only way you're going to, get recognized is if you toot your own horn.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're going to go out and toot some horns. But but I think that is so good. And I've actually never really thought about it. It's not about putting someone else down. It's actually just by showcasing yourself. We even have like an unwritten law in Swedish called the jantelagen, where it says like you shouldn't believe that you're better than anyone else. But just by expressing what you're good at or what you're doing well doesn't mean that anyone else is less than you. That I really love that definition. How can we become more confident? And this is like a huge, I mean, this is like a monthly coaching sessions, but let's start let's start with some kind of like small steps. How can
Yeah.
someone become a little bit more confident?
Absolutely. And you know what? It's so key because if you've been in the rat race for a long time and you feeling like they're getting your soul sucked out of you each day, your
Yeah.
confidence is probably pretty low, right? And that just recognizing that from the get-go is important to note. Like most people when they come to me, they're not feeling particularly good about themselves. So, their baseline's pretty low, right? A couple things you can do right away is absolutely what you just said, toot your own horn. Now, you don't have to toot your own horn to the whole world.
Yeah. Positive affirmations is good.
Right. But what we often do as humans, what we do is we add more stuff to our life. So we're not doing enough. We don't feel good, so we add more stuff. We don't feel good, so we add more stuff. We do more stuff. We do more stuff. And we're not even recognizing the stuff that we do and we've been doing for 10 years. Like,
Mm.
so it's about really actually recognizing also what you're already doing.
Mhm.
Because we do this, we add more stuff. And the next thing you know, we're just like, we feel like we've got nothing done. But if you were to actually go back and look at your whole day and list everything out, you've done a lot.
Yeah.
You're just not recognizing it anymore. So it is going back and going, wow, I sent out, so say you're, somebody who's you're working with, I sent out 20, DMs today. Oh my gosh, that's freaking awesome.
Mhm.
That's not
Yeah.
easy, right?
Yeah. And we
Or
can even take a bigger step back. I was a speaker at my old university, and I told the students there, I said, you can ask me anything you want. And one of the guys, he raised his hand and he said, hey, Josephine, I looked at your CV, I looked at your LinkedIn profile before, and he said, how did you become so successful? And I was like, oh, that's a nice question. It's like, and if you think about it, if you take a step back, look at yourself from a 20-year-old something, and you look at the things that you have accomplished already, because we are not youngsters any longer. And it's like, it is a lot. We have done a lot. It might have seemed a little bit easy because both you and I were very good with numbers and we like to analyze things. So that path we chose was a little bit easy for us, but it wasn't the right one, right? And still we accomplished a lot. And that is also one thing that really helped me when I took the leap, because I said,
Mhm.
if I could be successful in a role that I didn't really want to have in the first place, imagine how successful you can be when you do something you really love. I mean, it's crazy.
It's such a brilliant point you bring up because when I start working with people and they start telling me some of the things they've done, I'm just in awe and they don't see it. And
Yeah,
so they just don't. And you bring up such a valuable lesson. Like we've got to look back, like you said, look at who we are and what we've done from somebody else's eyes.
yeah.
Really, you know, I do this thing with clients where I ask them for wins. Like I ask them to share their wins with me. And it's not because I want to hear like the statistics or you did this, you did that. We dig a little deeper. Like, how did you feel when you did that? I felt confident. I'm so proud of myself. Yeah, let's anchor into that. It's not always the result. We focus so much too on the result,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's a combination of both, I believe. It's actually recognizing all the things you've done, but also recognizing like what kind of person is required to do that stuff
Mhm.
and honor
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I also want to circle back a little bit to what you said about being true to yourself and being honest to yourself, because I think there is an important difference there. Because I always said to myself, oh, I'm going to be true to myself. I'm going to be true to myself. The problem was that I wasn't really honest to myself. I wasn't really kind of like, yeah, honest to myself. I a little bit lied to myself about what it is that I want to do. So, what are the kind of the things that, how can we discover whether we are really honest to ourselves?
I think and it's such a great point, and I actually really believe because I've been doing this work, with clients, but also with myself. It's like an onion. I mean, I think what we're honest with one day, as we do more work, we actually see things differently. So I do think it's a progression. I do also believe that there are moments when we're scared that if we're really honest, it means we're going to have to make a change. And so we lie to ourselves so we don't have to. I mean, humans don't love change to begin with. We'd rather stay struggling and suffering in something we know rather than actually taking steps, realizing that any discomfort we make in a change is much shorter than the suffering that we experience if we stay in something that doesn't align with us, right? But we don't see that. So I think there's a combination of those two things, just being scared, but also understanding it's a process. And also one of the big things I'm sure you've noticed since being out of corporate, you're really taught to fit in. Like that's the name of the game. It's not, be yourself and you'll be accepted. It's like, no, this is what we do. This is you put on a certain outfit each day, right? You act a certain way, you use certain
These wouldn't have
language.
fit in corporate, or
No,
or these, or
no,
these would have fit, but with a black suit. Yeah.
100%. You're expected to fit in. You're not really taught to ask yourself, and it's not really accepted. No one really cares what you really want or really think really deep down. I mean, they might care about you as people, your coworkers probably do. I'm not saying that. But truthfully, the corporate structure isn't there to support you and what you really want. And, we see this with the whole work at home situation. Like I want my employer to provide this. Your employer probably doesn't really care. And it sounds heartless and ruthless, but it's the truth. Like
Yeah.
that's the way it goes. You're not going to be celebrated
Yeah.
for who you are necessarily in that environment. Again, people around you might, but as the corporate structure in itself, this doesn't happen, right?
Yeah. I love this talk, Andrea, and I know that what we've done now is just kind of like a little bit scratched on the surface, and because to really dig deep and to really make a change, we do need someone. Both you and I have invested a lot in ourselves, in our personal development, and I know that in order to really see these blind spots and to really dig out these things, to take those kind of like really dare to take those steps too, we need someone by our side. And if someone feels that, oh, Andrea could be the person that could help me on my path, how can they best connect with you?
Probably the best way is through my website, andreahorvath.com. There's lots of different ways to connect with me there. You can actually book a call directly with me there. I'm also on social media. I mean, Josephine, you and I both connected on LinkedIn, but probably my website. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So please reach out to Andrea, even if you only have a question or
Yeah.
anything. We are both, Andrea and I, are super open about questions. If you have a question about starting your own business, then feel free to reach out to me, especially if it's a coaching or consulting business, because that is my jam. If you feel that you're not yet ready to start a business, but you want to figure it all out, then you should definitely reach out to Andrea. And if you're not really sure what you want, but want to continue to be inspired, then just tune in to these Josefine Meets episodes. We release at least one episode weekly where I get to meet with super inspiring people just like Andrea, and we get to share our experiences that we have with our clients, so that you get to learn, be inspired, and be guided by us. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Oh, and thank you, Andrea, for being here.
Oh, thanks, Josephine.
Thank you so much. Bye.